Going into 2021, electric vehicles are certainly seemingly the story to follow as we continue to see a build in the likes of Tesla and those companies that supply a lot of the manufactured elements into these electric vehicles. I'm talking here about electric batteries, of course, which are a main component part that many are looking at. But is there a better way to play this? Should it be looking at some of the minerals behind what's going on? Let's now get a mining analyst viewpoint on this and tap into the experience of John Meyer from SP Angel. John, this is a fascinating story. It's not for the first time we've spoken about this in 2020. It certainly seems like outside of COVID, electric vehicles are definitely going to be one of the big milestone talking points, if you like, for 2020. Going into 2021, it seems like there's no let up in the story for people wanting to acquire the stock of, such as Tesla. How do you view this as a mining analyst?
Well, it's very interesting. While we've been looking at the guys producing the commodities, there's been this huge ramp up in valuation of stocks like Tesla. I mean, I think the market is broadly led by Tesla as a proxy, but then we see other stocks, innovative companies like QuantumScape, which have risen very, very strongly. It's now reversed into a shell called Kensington Acquisition Corp. They announced yesterday that they made a breakthrough with their solid state lithium-ion battery. And solid state means it's more robust. You can get more energy capacity into it. It's a very interesting development if it bears out to be true, because it's a bit of a, well, shall we say, it marks the next stage for battery capacity and fast charging. Now, they're not the only guys able to do this sort of thing, and there's a conference on virtually at the moment talking about these companies, which I was listening to this morning. So there's a lot happening here.
Yeah, let's examine this other area, though, of the minerals that go into this. I want to focus on, if I can, about QuantumScape and this idea of this solid-state battery. Does this differ from what we know to be the current battery technology? And if so, as I say, from a mining point of view, should we perhaps be looking at other minerals if we do go down this QuantumScape or Kensington solid-state battery idea? Does it take into account different area of the mining market?
Well, it's a very good question, Jeremy, because yeah, it does mean that there are some significant differences. The QuantumScape battery has a lithium anode, which means they can get greater energy density into the battery, and because it's a solid state battery, there's no liquid membrane in there. Although we don't see these batteries as having liquid in them, they effectively do. It's a liquid gel. So if the world decided to move to the QuantumScape battery technology, then yes, we'd need a lot more lithium to go into those batteries, and probably a little less graphite, and maybe even no silicon, for example, which some people are looking at. What I suspect we're going to get over the next 10 years is a whole range of different battery technologies being used. And it may be that you go and buy a car and you don't necessarily know exactly what battery technology is in the battery there. And it may be that the manufacturers start switching around a bit, because there's lots of different pros and cons with the different battery technologies, and it will take QuantumScape several years, probably 5 to 10 years, to get this battery accredited and get it into the factories. But we are taking this seriously to some degree, because they are partnered up with Volkswagen. They are a huge auto manufacturer.
Let's take a look as well, if we can, before we look in some more detail about some more other minerals that we should be focusing in on, bearing in mind the electric vehicle story is never going to go away now. I just wanted to return, if I can, to the Tesla share price. I think we've now got a company here with a market cap, I believe, of something like around about $616 billion. Now, if I just focus in on what's been happening this year, this is a company that's passed all the other motor manufacturers in terms of overall market cap. In other words, the overall value of the company. But I must highlight here, and I think, John, we were talking about this before we went to air, is the fact that this company, when you look at some of the other metrics, it has a price to earnings ratio of 1,287. Now, that is absolute, complete and utter, total madness. One question I want to put to you is, and I know this is something you contemplated, are we entering bubble territory here? Tesla is the poster boy for electric vehicles. Are you worried that Tesla is pulling up the rest of the sector too fast with it? Do you think that we are getting to the stage now where it's becoming a little crazy?
Well, somebody said to me a few years ago, never sell a bull market. I think there comes a point when you have to think about selling that bull market. It would be very dangerous to short Tesla, that's for sure. And you wouldn't want to do that with money that you couldn't afford to lose. But at some point, this has to come to an end. And I think, frankly, what we know is that the electric vehicle revolution is definitely coming to us now. There's no doubt about that. So many manufacturers are gearing up, and the way to play it, I think, is to play it through the mining companies and the processing companies that are able to provide the raw materials for those batteries, because there's going to be such a huge increase. If you look at the amount of graphite required for the current battery technologies, the world the under current forecasts, you're going to need at least 3 times as much graphite as the world currently produces. Now, there's 2 types of graphite. You can have synthetic graphite, which comes off petrochemical products, or you can get natural graphite, which is cheaper to produce. But there's only a few mining companies to do that, and people like Talga, and there's a new listing coming onto the stock market called Tirupati Graphite, who we know but we're not involved with. So it's very it's an interesting space, and there aren't many players. And I think there are going to be great opportunities for investors to buy into these raw materials companies as prices go up. And we're starting to see prices twitching off low levels. We saw rare earth prices increase considerably for neodymium and praseodymium last week, and I think that was more off the back of news on new wind turbines for the Dogger Bank wind turbine farm that was approved by the UK government. So as these things get announced, then investors seem to, well, the buyers go into the market and the prices move quite quickly.
Well, let's pick up on that point. Actually, I want to take another chart in, because I was talking recently to the chief executive of this company, Rainbow Rare Earths. This is another one. You talk about praseodymium and neodymium, if I correctly pronounce those 2 elements of the batteries. I believe that Rainbow Rare Earths intends to become one of the world's biggest suppliers of this. I mean, we've seen this massive ramp up in this stock here. That's rare earths. Just switch the chart. Let's talk on to copper. We've been talking a lot about this recently. And I ask you that question about the bubble around some of these tech stocks, but I have to ask you as well, are we in a bubble, do you think, with some of these stocks that have been bid up so much, going back to rare earths, for example, from the lows at 3 pence, we're talking about a small company here. In the space of just 2 months, we've gone up to 9.6 pence a share. Again, people saying bubble territory, or is this a realistic estimation of potential growth because of the opportunities around this space?
Well, many people would still consider Rainbow and other similar companies to be micro caps. Its market capitalization is under 50 million pounds, so it's got an awful long way it can go. It recently signed up a new project, which in theory could produce several hundred, a couple of $100 million of revenue on an annual basis. And so, yeah, there's a lot. It doesn't take a big increase in what they will receive for neodymium and praseodymium, for example, to make an enormous difference to their economic value. And so, for me, many of these companies are only just getting started. And this doesn't just apply to Rainbow Rare Earths. There's a whole bunch of these companies that have been unloved and underinvested in by the market for some years, and suddenly they're becoming very important because there are only limited places you can go to get these raw materials. And that even applies to bigger metals, shall we say, like lithium, like copper. There's a relatively small number of stocks that you can go to.
Just like we've been talking as well about some of the supply issues that could well be upon us. You're talking, I think, about graphite, the fact we need far more than has already been mined. I think you've mentioned this in the context of copper. Is this a theme across the metals complex, that the demand of these electric vehicle businesses, those that make the batteries and other technologies that come through, are you seeing this increasingly across the metals complex, that we're just not mining enough of these things?
Absolutely, we're seeing metals where experts were forecasting surpluses for this year, suddenly going into deficit because there is additional buying of these metals, not necessarily from electric vehicles manufacturers or the battery manufacturers, but just from industry as a whole. So China has ramped up its manufacturing to such a level that it's buying in a lot of just a lot more commodity than anyone had anticipated, and part of that is feeding the insatiable demand of the West for domestic appliances and other consumer products. And at the same time, the Chinese government has ramped up, under its dual circulation strategy, domestic demand by state-sponsored discounts on certain types of products. I think we're talking fridges and freezers and washing machines in this sort of instance. And they've got so much stimulus going into infrastructure projects, new roads, new rail, suburban rail systems, building new suburbs around major cities, that sort of thing. So there's an awful lot suddenly happening now that and particularly as we're coming out of the sort of the COVID crisis, as I would call it, things are really beginning to motor. Don't forget, the West needs a lot of new infrastructure. If you go around the United States, they've got a lot of crumbling infrastructure that needs rebuilding, and I think that will be funded by the Biden administration over the next few years.
Just one final question. I think this is probably the last time we're going to be talking before the end of 2020. Can you believe it? I mean, where has it all gone? But let me just ask you, how excited are you about 2021? Clearly, COVID is not going away. And I guess that when we do next speak, it will be in the same surroundings as we have been for the last 7 or 8 months or so. What about 2021? What is it do you think will be the signature of next year in terms of mining?
Well, now the vaccination campaigns have started, we can see our way out of this crisis and a return to a new normality. But the impact of the stimulus that is coming in is going to be huge. And so in the way that we had a strong recovery in the mining sector after the global financial crisis in 2008, and if anything, we've now added up $20 trillion worth of stimulus that's been pledged or is being pledged. If we add in the 2.9 billion that's expected to come into the US over the next year, that's 2 trillion for Joe Biden's infrastructure program, and another 900 billion from the more immediate economic recovery plan, or emergency stimulus, whatever they call it. So I do think this is going to be a major driver, and that will, or just by its very existence, create demand for more and more metals. And so, yes, I think we're going to see 2 or 3 very strong years in the mining sector from here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. John, look, thanks indeed for joining us. Have a great holiday period and good new year, and I'll speak to you in January. Thanks indeed for your time. It's been a pleasure. That's
Thank you.
John Meyer talking about electric vehicles and moving the mining sector into 2021. He's from SP Angel. For more videos from us here at IGTV, join us on Twitter at IGTV and subscribe to our YouTube channel.